2 days after a deadly school shooting in Matthews sparked by bullying, different groups are trying to find ways to stop it.
The Triad chapter of Bikers Against Bullies is one of those groups. WFMY News 2's Jessica Winters talked to them about their new mission to help people who are bullied and those who do the bullying.
We're not against bullies. We're against bullying.
And that's where there's a gray area. Amber Wilson says bullies need help too.
You be kind to people. It doesn't matter who they are. You always are kind. So who would stop?
She's organized a ride to Matthews this weekend with a motorcycle company called Cycle Gear. They're calling it an anti-hate, anti-bullying, anti-violence ride.
We teach the kids tolerance of each other.
Matthews police say bullying sparked the shooting, but wouldn't say who bullied who. Bikers Against Bullies is raising money to help the families, both families. Half the money will go to the family of the shooter, Jaytwan Cuffey, half to the family of Bobby McKeithen.
Not only did one child lose his life, but another child is now facing first-degree murder charges by his choice. But he's also lost to his family. I mean, you know, it's a possibility they'll never see him again out of petty violence.
As a mom of 4 herself, Wilson said there are no winners in this situation.
It's terrifying. And parents shouldn't have to be scared to send their children to school, ever.
And you can find information about the Triad chapter ride to Matthews this Sunday on our website, WFMYnews2.com.